Hi, I'm Maya. The day my brother laughed in my face about my dead-end job at the community library, his Rolex glinted under the restaurant chandelier. Enjoy shelving books while I close million-dollar deals, he smirked. His executive friends nodded along. But beneath those dusty shelves and forgotten archives lay a corporate secret worth billions. And now, the boardroom they denied me access to is mine, the company they built on my grandfather's stolen patents, under my control, and their smug voices silenced. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I spent the entire morning preparing for our family brunch. Nothing fancy, just avocado toast with poached eggs, fresh fruit platters, and the homemade granola my daughter Zoe loved. I arranged wildflowers in a small ceramic vase and set out 5 plates on my modest dining table. It was Memorial Day weekend, and for once, I wanted our family gathering to feel pleasant. My brother Ryan and his wife were supposed to arrive at 11. I wore my nicest blouse, a teal one I'd splurged on during a rare sale at Nordstrom. I even helped Zoe pick out a pretty sundress, and my younger daughter Lily arranged the napkins into somewhat crooked swans. They weren't perfect, but her proud smile was worth every awkward fold. At 11:20, Ryan's Tesla pulled into my driveway. I watched from the kitchen window as he stepped out first, immaculate in his tailored suit despite it being a casual family brunch. His wife Vanessa followed in designer sunglasses and heels that surely cost more than my monthly rent. They didn't bring anything, not wine, not dessert, just a sleek leather portfolio that Ryan tucked under his arm. "Don't bother with all this," Vanessa said as she stepped inside, waving dismissively at my spread. "We've already eaten at Verdant. Their new chef is exceptional." I blinked. "Oh, I made brunch for everyone." She sniffed the air. "That's cute." Ryan kissed my cheek absently, then walked straight to my living room. "Just need to check some emails," he called, already pulling out his laptop. Market never sleeps, even on holidays. I stood there, still holding a serving spoon in my left hand. At the table, my daughters stared at the untouched food. Lily whispered, "Can we still eat, Mommy?" "Of course," I said gently, placing the fruit platter in the center. But the moment felt deflated. Ryan's father-in-law Milton arrived 10 minutes later, immediately opening his takeout coffee and taking a loud sip. "So," he said, eyeing my modest apartment. "I hear you're still at that little library. How quaint." I smiled tightly. "It's the Regional Archive Center now. I've been promoted to head archivist." Ryan chuckled from his spot on the couch. "Even a dead-end job has a ladder to climb, I guess." His wife fake laughed. "What are you going to do next? Alphabetize the world's largest collection of forgotten books?" My heart sank, but I didn't want to ruin the gathering. "Grandpa believed in preserving knowledge," I said softly. "He always said archives hold more value than people realize." Milton sipped his coffee. "That library is the perfect place for someone like you, Maya. Quiet, invisible, irrelevant." I looked down at my plate. The carefully arranged berries suddenly looked sad. No one noticed when I stopped eating. Zoe kept glancing at me with concerned eyes. Lily looked confused, too young to understand the subtle cruelty, but old enough to sense the tension. After brunch, while the girls were watching a movie in their room, Ryan cornered me in the kitchen. The flowers had started to droop, petals falling onto the countertop like my fading optimism. He didn't even lower his voice. "I need you to sign over Grandpa's old patents. My company's legal team says there might be some ambiguity in the ownership structure." I turned slowly. "What? I've carried this family long enough," he snapped. "You sit here playing house with your little archivist title while I'm building an actual legacy. Those patents are worthless individually, but my company needs clean title to them for an acquisition." I stared at him. "Those are Grandpa's inventions. He left them to both of us." Ryan's jaw tensed. "Maya, don't be dramatic. They're just gathering dust like those books you love so much. I'm not signing anything without understanding what's happening." His voice rose. "This is why you'll never be more than a failure. No vision, no ambition." The words hit harder than I expected. Zoe appeared in the hallway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Her eyes were wide. Ryan stormed out the front door, Vanessa trailing behind with a smirk thrown over her shoulder. I tucked the girls into bed later that night. Lily mumbled something about wanting a story, but fell asleep before I could begin reading. Zoe slid something under my hand, a folded piece of printer paper. On the front, it said, "For Mom," in purple marker. Inside, a crayon drawing of me standing tall in what looked like a castle, wearing a crown. Underneath she'd written, "You're the queen of our hearts." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Thank you, sweetie." When the house went quiet, I slipped into my small home office and placed the card beside my laptop. I sat there listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing outside. My thoughts drifted to my grandfather's workshop, where he'd spent decades inventing and tinkering, believing his work would change lives someday. I didn't know it then, but those forgotten patents were about to become my unexpected battlefield. I barely slept that night. Not from the hurt, though it lingered like a bruise that keeps getting bumped, but from the nagging sense that there was more to Ryan's sudden interest in Grandpa's old patents. I kept replaying his words, worthless individually, as if they were looping in my mind. Zoe's card still sat on my desk, that crayon crown seeming almost prophetic in the dim light. I crept out of bed before dawn, the sky still a canvas of deep blues and purples. I made lunch for the girls, peanut butter and banana sandwiches cut into stars using the cookie cutter they loved. Added apple slices, yogurt pouches, and little notes with drawn hearts. It felt important to maintain these small rituals when everything else seemed uncertain. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Ryan stood in my hallway, still in yesterday's clothes, eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept either. "You still don't get it, do you?" he said, voice gravelly with exhaustion. I didn't answer, just finished packing the lunches and slid them into the girls' colorful backpacks. "I've scheduled a meeting with the lawyers this afternoon," he continued. "They'll explain everything. Just sign the papers, Maya. For once in your life, don't be difficult." That morning, I told the girls I'd be working late at the archive. "Miss Patel will pick you up from school," I explained, forcing brightness into my voice. Zoe nodded, always observant beyond her years. Lily just asked if she could have an extra cookie in her lunch. I kissed their foreheads as they headed to the bus stop and stood by the window long after they disappeared around the corner. The quiet in the apartment felt oppressive, like the air before a storm. Instead of going to the archive, I drove to the university law library. Professor Santiago, who taught intellectual property law and occasionally visited our archive for research, had once offered her help if I ever needed legal advice. Today, I needed it desperately. She welcomed me into her cluttered office with a warm smile that faded when she saw my expression. "What's wrong, Maya?" she asked, clearing books from a chair. I explained Ryan's sudden demand, his company's interest, the vague threats about an acquisition. Professor Santiago's brow furrowed as she listened. "Your grandfather's patents, do you know what they're for exactly?" "Some kind of data processing systems," I said. He was ahead of his time with algorithm development, but the technology wasn't ready back then. "The patents are nearly 20 years old." She nodded slowly. "And now your brother's company wants them. What company does he work for again?" "Neurotech Dynamics. He's their chief strategy officer." Her eyebrows shot up. "Maya, do you know what Neurotech is working on?" I shook my head. "They're developing quantum neural networks for AI systems. It's cutting-edge stuff." She leaned forward. "If your grandfather's algorithms relate to data processing optimizations, they might be foundational to what Neurotech is building." My heart began to race. "You mean they might actually be valuable?" "Potentially extremely valuable. Patent extensions can be filed for fundamental technologies if they're being implemented in new ways." She pulled out her laptop. "Let me look something up." While she typed, I stared out her window at students crossing the campus quad, feeling strangely disconnected from the ordinary scene. "Maya," Professor Santiago said finally, her voice careful. "There's an industry rumor that Neurotech is being acquired by Global Core. If that's true, and if your grandfather's patents are key to their neural network architecture." "What?" I prompted when she paused. "We could be talking billions, not millions." She closed her laptop. "Don't sign anything. Let me connect you with someone who specializes in tech patent litigation." That afternoon, instead of meeting Ryan's lawyers, I visited the county records office. The clerk looked bored as I requested all documentation related to my grandfather's estate. "That's over 5 years ago," she said. "Might take some time to retrieve." "I'll wait," I replied, settling into an uncomfortable plastic chair. 3 hours later, I spread the documents across a reading table, searching for anything related to the patents. Most seemed straightforward. The house going to my parents, who had since passed away, his workshop and personal effects split between Ryan and me. Then I found it, a codicil to his will, filed just 2 weeks before he died. The intellectual property rights and patents listed in Appendix C shall be held in trust for both my grandchildren, with proceeds to be divided equally. Neither may dispose of these assets without the explicit written consent of the other. My hands trembled slightly. Ryan couldn't sell or transfer the patents without my signature. No wonder he needed those papers signed. As I drove to pick up the girls from their after-school program, my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Ryan. Where were you? The lawyers waited for an hour. This isn't a game, Maya. Call me immediately. I silenced the phone and slipped it into my purse. For the first time in years, I felt a strange calm determination. At the community center, Lily ran to me with a painting of what might have been a unicorn or possibly a very colorful dog. Zoe followed more slowly, studying my face. Are you okay, Mom? She asked as we walked to the car. I smiled, a real smile. This time. Yes, sweetheart. I think I am. That evening, after the girls were asleep, I sat at my small desk with a cup of tea and my grandfather's old leather journal. I'd always treasured it as a sentimental keepsake, full of his thoughts and occasional sketches. Now I turned its pages with new purpose, looking for any details about his work. Most entries were personal reflections or notes about family events, but scattered throughout were technical diagrams and dense paragraphs about recursive data optimization and predictive algorithmic frameworks. I wasn't a computer scientist, but even I could see these were sophisticated concepts, especially for their time. Near the back of the journal, a loose page was tucked into the binding. I carefully unfolded it to find a letter, never sent, addressed to me and Ryan. My dear grandchildren, what I leave behind may seem like dusty old patents and technical jargon, but they represent something more, a vision of how information could be organized and understood in ways that might someday change everything. The world wasn't ready when I filed these patents, but I believe you'll live to see their potential realized. Ryan, with your business acumen, and Maya, with your deep appreciation for how knowledge is preserved and connected across time, you each hold part of what's needed to steward this legacy. Trust each other. Work together. What seems dormant now may someday bloom beyond anything I could imagine. With love and faith in both of you, Grandpa. A tear splashed onto the paper before I could stop it. I carefully blotted it dry, then took a deep breath and reached for my phone. Instead of calling Ryan, I emailed Professor Santiago's contact, the patent litigation specialist, and requested the earliest possible appointment. Then I did something I'd never done before. I called in sick to the archive for the next day. In 10 years of working there, I'd never once used a sick day unless the girls were ill. Tomorrow, I needed time to understand exactly what I was fighting for. The next morning, after dropping the girls at school, I drove to the university's engineering department. Dr. Kapoor, who had been a junior colleague of my grandfather's decades ago, was now department chair. He'd always had a soft spot for me, occasionally sending over technical books he thought the archive should have. His office was a maze of engineering journals, robotic prototypes, and what looked like half-disassembled computer parts. He greeted me with surprise and delight. Maya, what brings you to my chaotic corner? I explained my situation, showing him copies of the patent documents I'd retrieved from my grandfather's files. As he read, his expression shifted from curiosity to astonishment. My God, he whispered, adjusting his glasses. These algorithms, they're the foundation of what we now call quantum-accessible neural networks. Your grandfather was theorizing. These structures before quantum computing was more than a distant concept. Are they valuable? I asked. Dr. Kapoor laughed, a short, incredulous sound. Valuable? Maya, these principles are fundamental to every major AI development happening today. The mathematical framework he created, it's like he built the architectural plans for a skyscraper when everyone else was still arguing about how to make a sturdy tent. He turned to his computer and pulled up a recent scientific journal. Look at this paper from Neurotech Dynamics, your brother's company. Yes? Their breakthrough novel approach to neural network design. He pointed to a diagram, then back to my grandfather's patent. It's essentially the same structural framework, just implemented with modern technology. My breath caught. There. Using his work without acknowledgement? It appears so. Dr. Kapoor looked troubled. And if Global Core is acquiring them, as rumors suggest, these patents could be worth billions, I finished. He nodded gravely. Maya, you need serious legal protection immediately. This isn't just about family squabbles anymore. By the time I left Dr. Kapoor's office, my phone showed 15 missed calls from Ryan. As I walked to my car, it rang again. This time, I answered. Where the hell have you been? Ryan's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. Researching Grandpa's patents, I replied calmly. The ones Neurotech is apparently using without proper licensing or attribution. A lengthy silence followed. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted to something smoother, more calculated. Let's not be hasty. There are nuances here you don't understand. Why don't you come to my office? We can discuss this like adults. I'd prefer to meet on neutral ground, I countered. With our respective legal representation present. He laughed, but it sounded strained. Legal representation? Maya, you can't afford the kind of lawyers who handle this level of intellectual property law. Actually, I said, thinking of Professor Santiago's connections, I believe I can. Coffee shop on Main Street, tomorrow at 10 a.m. I ended the call before he could respond and sat in my car for several minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, surprised by my own firmness. The trembling I expected didn't come. Instead, I felt a curious sense of clarity, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally shifting into place. That night, as I helped the girls with homework, my phone continuously buzzed with messages from Ryan, alternating between thinly veiled threats and attempts at brotherly concern. I silenced it again and focused on Lily's spelling words and Zoe's science project about ecosystems. Later, after tucking them in, I sat on my small balcony with a glass of wine, looking out at the city lights. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a different future, one where I wasn't always struggling to make ends meet, where the girls could have opportunities I'd thought beyond our reach, where my brother couldn't dismiss me with a casual wave of his hand. Not out of vengeance, I realized, but because it was simply right. My grandfather had believed in both of us, trusted us to honor his legacy together. Ryan had chosen a different path. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Professor Santiago's contact had agreed to meet me early tomorrow, before my appointment with Ryan. I took a deep breath of the cool night air and felt, strangely, like I was finally waking up from a long sleep. The morning dawned bright and clear, almost mockingly beautiful for what promised to be a confrontational day. I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, a navy blazer over a cream blouse and tailored pants I'd bought for job interviews years ago. I braided Zoe's hair while she read her book, and helped Lily find her missing shoe, which had somehow migrated under the couch. You look different, Mom, Zoe observed as I dropped them at school. Different how? I asked, smoothing her hair. She studied me with those serious eyes that missed nothing. Stronger, she decided finally. Like the queen in my drawing. I hugged her tightly, then watched them walk into the building, backpacks bouncing with each step. Their resilience constantly amazed me, how they'd adapted to our modest life without complaint, finding joy in small things while their cousins vacationed in Europe and had private tennis lessons. The law office of Patricia Vega occupied the 10th floor of a sleek downtown building, far more impressive than I'd expected. The receptionist led me to a corner conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Professor Santiago was already there, along with a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Patricia. I've reviewed the patents in your grandfather's journal, Patricia said, wasting no time on pleasantries. Based on the documentation you provided and what we've uncovered about Neuroteca's technology platform, you have an extremely strong case. She spread several documents on the table. Your brother's company has been implementing these patented processes in their core products for at least 3 years without proper licensing or attribution. Furthermore, their pending acquisition by Global Core hinges on these technologies being proprietary to Neurotech. What does that mean for me? I asked. It means, she said with a small, fierce smile, that you hold extraordinary leverage. Global Core won't proceed with a multi-billion-dollar acquisition if there's a patent infringement claim that could invalidate the core technology they're buying. Professor Santiago leaned forward. Maya, you could potentially negotiate for significant damages, ongoing royalties, and possibly even a seat at the table in terms of how these technologies are implemented in the future. My head spun with possibilities. What's my next step? Patricia checked her watch. Your meeting with your brother is in 40 minutes. We'll accompany you. Don't agree to anything, don't sign anything. Let me do most of the talking. As we gathered our materials, Patricia paused. One more thing, Maya. Your grandfather's journal mentions something called Keystone Integration Protocol. Do you know what that refers to? I shook my head. That doesn't sound familiar. It appears to be a critical component that bridges the theoretical algorithms with practical applications. If it exists, it would be extremely valuable. Your brother hasn't mentioned it? No, I said slowly. But I might know where to look. The coffee shop on Main Street was busy when we arrived. Ryan was already there, along with 2 men in expensive suits who I assumed were his lawyers. His confident smile faltered when he saw Patricia and Professor Santiago flanking me. Maya, he said, standing. I thought we were meeting privately. Like you brought your lawyers privately? I gestured to the men beside him. He recovered quickly. Legal advisors. This is complicated stuff. Indeed it is, Patricia interjected smoothly, extending her hand. Patricia Vega, representing Ms. Chen in this intellectual property matter. Ryan's expression hardened as we all sat down. This is unnecessary. We're family. Family who respect each other don't need lawyers, I said quietly. But here we are. Patricia opened her briefcase. Let's be direct. Neurotech Dynamics has been implementing patented technologies belonging to my client without proper licensing or compensation. These patents are critical to your neural network architecture. And, by extension, to your pending acquisition by Globalcore. One of Ryan's lawyers shifted uncomfortably. Ryan's face remained impassive, but I noticed a muscle twitching in his jaw, a childhood tell when he was cornered. Those patents are outdated, he countered. What we've developed goes far beyond those basic concepts. Yet built fundamentally upon them, Patricia replied, sliding forward a technical analysis prepared by Dr. Kapoor. Your novel neural network architecture implements the exact recursive optimization frameworks described in these patents, just with modern processing capabilities. Ryan glanced at the document but didn't touch it. What exactly are you asking for, Maya? Before I could answer, his phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression changed subtly, something between surprise and alarm. He excused himself and stepped outside to take the call. When he returned minutes later, his composure had visibly slipped. We need to reschedule, he said abruptly. Something's come up at the office. Patricia smiled thinly. Of course. We'll be in touch with settlement terms by the end of the week. As Ryan and his lawyers hurried out, Professor Santiago looked at me curiously. What just happened? I watched through the window as Ryan argued with someone on the phone, gesturing emphatically. I'm not sure, I admitted. But I think someone else just discovered what we know. Later that afternoon, I returned to the Archive Center, not as an employee but as a researcher. Ms. Patel, my assistant, raised her eyebrows when I requested access to the special collections room without changing into my work clothes. Personal project, I explained. The special collections housed local historical documents, including papers from prominent scientists and inventors who had lived in the area. My grandfather had donated many of his early notebooks and research materials. Before his death, I'd cataloged them myself, but at the time, I hadn't fully understood their significance. In the climate-controlled room, I carefully searched through the boxes of his materials. Near the bottom of the third container, I found what I was looking for, a leather-bound notebook labeled simply KIP Notes. Keystone Integration Protocol. Inside were detailed diagrams, mathematical formulas, and methodologies for implementing his theoretical frameworks in practical applications. This wasn't just an extension of the patents, it was the bridge that made them usable in modern systems. The missing piece that would make his algorithms not just valuable but implementable. I photographed several key pages, then carefully returned everything to its proper place. As I was leaving, my phone rang, an unknown number. Miss Chen, a woman's voice asked when I answered. This is Eleanor Wyatt, chairperson of the board at Globalcore. I understand you're the co-owner of certain patents currently being utilized by Neurotech Dynamics. My breath caught. That's correct. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow. Without lawyers, without your brother. Just a conversation about potential futures. I hesitated, thinking of Patricia's warnings about negotiating alone. Miss Chen, Eleanor continued, I've done my research on you. 15 years preserving knowledge and making it accessible. A dedicated mother. Someone who values substance over flash. I believe we might understand each other better than you think. Why without my lawyer? I asked. Because what I'm considering goes beyond typical settlement terms. Your brother has been less than forthcoming about these patents. I'd like to hear your perspective directly. I thought for a moment. I'll meet you, but I'll be briefing my lawyer immediately before and after. Fair enough, she replied. My office, 9 a.m. tomorrow. That evening, as the girls and I made dinner together, a simple pasta with vegetables, my phone buzzed continuously with messages from Ryan. I ignored them all. Whatever was happening at Neurotech, he was clearly panicking. Zoe noticed my distraction. Is Uncle Ryan still being mean? She asked as she carefully tore lettuce for the salad. It's complicated, sweetie, I said. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about important things. Is it about great-grandpa's inventions? She persisted. I heard you talking on the phone. I paused, considering how much to share. Yes. Great-grandpa created some very special ideas that are helping build new technology. Uncle Ryan and I disagree about who should make decisions about those ideas. Lily looked up from where she was setting the table. Great-grandpa was smart like Mom, she declared with the simple certainty of a 7-year-old. That's why he gave you his special book. I blinked in surprise. What special book, Lily? The one with the funny drawing on it. You read it at night sometimes when you think we're sleeping. His journal. The one with all his personal thoughts and notes that I'd always treasured as a keepsake, never realizing its technical significance until now. That night, after tucking the girls in, I called Patricia and explained my upcoming meeting with Eleanor Wyatt. She wasn't happy but provided extensive guidance on what to say and what to avoid. Remember, she emphasized, you're not just negotiating financial compensation. You're negotiating influence over how these technologies will shape the future. I sat up late, reviewing my grandfather's journal again with new eyes. On the final page, in his shaky handwriting from those last weeks, he'd written, knowledge isn't meant to be hoarded or weaponized. It's meant to be stewarded responsibly, with wisdom and compassion. My Maya understands this. I hope Ryan will learn it too. The Global Core headquarters occupied a striking glass tower downtown. The security guard checked my ID, then directed me to an express elevator that whisked me to the top floor. The doors opened onto a minimalist reception area, with sweeping views of the city and mountains beyond. A young assistant led me to a conference room where Eleanor Wyatt waited alone. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair cut in a precise bob and alert eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they encountered. She rose to greet me with a firm handshake. "Thank you for coming, Miss Chen," she said, gesturing to a chair. "Coffee?" "Please," I replied, taking a seat. The table between us was bare except for 2 folders and a small device that looked like a sophisticated voice recorder. "For transparency," Eleanor explained, noticing my glance at the device. "It will create a transcript of our conversation that we can both receive copies of." I nodded my approval, and she pressed a button to activate it. "I'll be direct," she began. "Neurotech's acquisition has been paused pending resolution of this patent situation. Your brother presented these technologies as proprietary developments when, in fact, they appear to be implementations of your grandfather's work." She opened one of the folders. "What interests me most, however, isn't just the patents themselves, but what they represent. Your grandfather was developing frameworks for how information could be organized, accessed, and utilized in ways that were decades ahead of his time." "That's correct," I confirmed. "And you," she continued, "have spent your career in archives, understanding how knowledge is preserved and connected across time. That's not coincidental, is it?" I felt a strange calm settling over me. "No. I've always felt drawn to his vision of how information should be handled, with care, context, and consideration for its impact." Eleanor nodded. "That's precisely why I wanted to meet with you directly. Global Core is acquiring Neurotech not just for market advantage, but because these technologies will form the backbone of how information is processed globally for decades to come. The question isn't just who profits, but who guides." She leaned forward slightly. "Your brother sees dollar signs. You see responsibility. I'm interested in working with someone who understands both." "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. "A settlement that includes not just financial compensation, but a position on Global Core's board, specifically overseeing the ethical implementation of these technologies. Your brother would remain at Neurotech in his current role, but ultimate authority for how your grandfather's work is developed would rest with you." I took a slow breath, processing the magnitude of what she was suggesting. "Why would you offer this to me? I don't have a business background or technical credentials." "Technical advisors are plentiful," Eleanor replied. "People with moral clarity and historical perspective are rare. Your grandfather understood that these algorithms could change how humanity interacts with information. You understand the weight of that responsibility." She slid the second folder toward me. "These are the initial terms. Your lawyer will want to review them, of course. But I wanted you to hear the offer directly from me first." As I reached for the folder, my phone buzzed with a text. "Ryan again, don't sign anything with Global Core. They're trying to cut me out." I silenced the phone and met Eleanor's gaze. "I'll need time to consider this." "Of course," she said, standing. "Take the weekend. We can meet again on Monday with our respective legal teams." As I was leaving, she added, "Your grandfather would be proud, Miss Chen. Not many people would handle this situation with such grace." Outside, the spring air felt especially crisp, the city unusually vibrant. I walked several blocks before calling Patricia to brief her on the meeting. Her initial skepticism gave way to cautious optimism as I outlined Eleanor's proposal. "This is unprecedented," she admitted. "Board positions are usually reserved for major investors or industry veterans. She must really value your perspective. Or she's trying to neutralize a potential threat," I countered. "Perhaps both," Patricia suggested. "Either way, it's a powerful opportunity if we can negotiate the right terms." As I ended the call, another text from Ryan appeared. "This isn't over. Family meeting tonight. My house. 7 p.m. I considered ignoring it, but after a moment, I replied, "I'll be there. Bringing Patricia." His response came instantly, "No lawyers. Just family." I smiled faintly, remembering the voice recorder in Eleanor's office. Then no meeting. Everything through proper channels now. By the time I picked up the girls from school, 5 more increasingly desperate messages had arrived from Ryan. I deleted them all without reading and focused instead on Lily's excited chatter about her science project winning first place. That evening, while helping Zoe with her math homework, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Ryan standing alone, his usual polished appearance noticeably disheveled. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. I told you, everything. Through the lawyers now. Maya, please, he said, his voice strained. Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're about to destroy everything I've built. No, I corrected him. I'm about to ensure our grandfather's work is properly acknowledged and responsibly implemented. You're the one who tried to take what wasn't entirely yours. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of our childhood that for a moment, I glimpsed the brother I'd once adored. You don't understand the business world. These people will use you and discard you. At least with me, we keep it in the family. Like you kept me in the family? I asked quietly. All those dinners where you mocked my career? All those times you dismissed me as irrelevant? That kind of family? Ryan flinched. I never meant, you meant every word, I interrupted. You thought I was small, so you treated me as small. But Grandpa saw something in me that you missed, and now Global Core sees it too. Behind Ryan's shoulder, I could see Zoe watching us from the hallway, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. I gestured for her to go back to her homework. We'll talk through our lawyers, I said firmly, starting to close the door. Ryan put his hand against it. Eleanor Wyatt isn't who you think she is. She's using you to devalue neurotech before the acquisition. Good night, Ryan, I said, closing the door despite his protest. I leaned against it for a moment, listening to his retreating footsteps, then turned to find Zoe standing closer than I expected. Uncle Ryan looked scared, she observed. I nodded slowly. Sometimes people get scared when things change. Are you scared? She asked. I considered the question honestly. A little. But mostly I feel clear. Like I finally understand something important. That night, after the girls were asleep, I spread Eleanor's proposal across my kitchen table. The financial terms were generous, fair compensation for the patent infringement, ongoing royalties, and a substantial signing bonus. But the board position was what truly mattered, a seat at the table where decisions would be made about how these technologies shape the future. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Maya, this is Vanessa. Ryan hasn't slept. In 2 days. Whatever they're offering you, we can match it. Please don't destroy everything he's worked for. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and began researching Global Core's previous acquisitions, their ethical framework statements, and their board structure. By the time I finally went to bed, dawn was breaking, painting my small bedroom with soft golden light. Monday arrived with a surprising calm. I arranged for Ms. Patel to pick up the girls from school, then met Patricia at her office to review the final negotiation strategy. Ryan's team reached out 3 times over the weekend, she informed me. They're panicking. And Global Core? They're proceeding as if the deal is imminent. Their legal team has been cooperative and transparent. She shuffled through some papers. There's something else you should know. I had our researchers look into Eleanor Wyatt's background. She handed me a file. She was a library sciences major before shifting to tech. Her doctoral thesis was on ethical information architecture. And she cited your grandfather's early published papers. I stared at the document in surprise. She never mentioned this. Perhaps she wanted to see if you'd recognize the connection yourself, Patricia suggested. The meeting is at 2 p.m. Are you ready? I nodded, thinking of Zoe's drawing with its crayon crown. More than ready. The Global Core conference room was filled with people when we arrived, lawyers, executives, technical specialists. Ryan sat at one end of the long table, flanked by his legal team. He looked up when I entered but quickly averted his gaze. Eleanor rose to greet me, extending her hand. Ms. Chen. Thank you for joining us. The meeting began with technical presentations confirming how Neurotech's systems implemented my grandfather's patented frameworks. Ryan's team attempted to argue that the implementations were sufficiently novel to constitute new intellectual property, but Global Core's technical experts systematically dismantled each claim. Throughout the presentations, I noticed Eleanor watching me rather than the screens, as if my reactions were more important than the content itself. When the technical portion concluded, Eleanor spoke. Based on our analysis, it's clear that Neurotech's core technology directly implements the Chen patents without proper licensing or attribution. This constitutes infringement, but more importantly, it raises questions about Neurotech's transparency in our acquisition discussions. Ryan's lead lawyer leaned forward. We're prepared to offer Ms. Chen a generous settlement for any perceived infringement. And the Keystone Integration Protocol? Eleanor asked. A tense silence fell over the room. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. The what? His lawyer asked. Eleanor turned to me. Miss Chen, perhaps you could enlighten us? All eyes turned to me. I opened my bag and removed a folder containing the photographs I'd taken of my grandfather's notebook. The Keystone Integration Protocol is the bridge between theoretical algorithms and practical applications, I explained, sliding the folder to the center of the table. It's the methodology that makes these patents implementable in modern systems. Without it, the algorithms remain theoretical. Ryan's face had gone pale. One of Global Core's technical experts picked up the folder and began examining the contents, his expression shifting from curiosity to something like awe. This is remarkable, he murmured. The implementation pathway is completely mapped. Eleanor smiled slightly. And where did you find this, Miss Chen? In the Regional Archives Center, I replied. Where my grandfather donated his papers. The place my brother always called my dead-end job. A ripple of murmurs spread around the table. Ryan stared at me, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face, shock, anger, and something that might have been grudging respect. Eleanor stood. I believe we have what we need to proceed. Ms. Chen has demonstrated clear ownership of the intellectual property in question, and Neurotech has clearly implemented it without authorization. Our offer stands as presented on Friday, with one addition. She looked directly at Ryan. Mr. Chen will retain his position at Neurotech, reporting to the new chairman of the board, his sister. Ryan's lawyer started to object, but Ryan himself raised a hand to silence him. On what grounds? He asked, his voice strained. On the grounds that she understands the responsibility of this technology in ways you've failed to demonstrate, Eleanor replied evenly. And on the grounds that she holds the key to making it work as intended. The room fell silent again. Ryan and I locked eyes across the table, a moment of reckoning between siblings who had taken such different paths. I need to consult with my client, Ryan's lawyer announced, standing. Of course, Eleanor agreed. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. As the room cleared, leaving just Eleanor and me, she tilted her head slightly. You never mentioned finding the Keystone Protocol. You never mentioned studying my grandfather's work, I countered. A small smile touched her lips. I wondered if you'd discover that connection. Your grandfather's vision of information architecture shaped my entire career. When I realized his granddaughter was the archivist holding these patents, it felt like closing a circle. Why make me chairman? I asked. Ryan has the business experience. Business experience is common, she replied. Moral clarity is rare. Your grandfather understood that these technologies could fundamentally change how humanity interacts with information. You inherit not just his patents, but his sense of responsibility toward knowledge. She gathered her papers. Besides, I suspect you'll be better at it than you think. When Ryan returned, he came alone. He looked different, the polished veneer cracked to reveal something more human underneath. Can we talk? He asked. Just us. Eleanor nodded and left the room. Ryan sat across from me, hands clasped tightly on the table. You found it, he said finally. The protocol. Grandpa told me about it once, said it was the key to everything. I've had teams searching for years. It was never hidden, I replied. It was preserved, catalogued, and accessible, in the archive where I've worked all these years while you mocked my career. He had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't understand. I thought I was the one building his legacy while you were just maintaining dusty records. His legacy isn't just in the patents, Ryan. It's in how we approach knowledge itself, with care, with context, with responsibility. He was quiet for a long moment. I'm not sure I can work for my little sister. Then don't think of it that way, I suggested. Think of it as working with me, the way Grandpa intended. He left everything to both of us for a reason. Ryan looked up, studying my face as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. You're really going to do this? Step into a corporate boardroom? Lead a technology company? I'm going to ensure Grandpa's work is used responsibly, I corrected. And yes, I'm going to learn whatever I need to learn to do that effectively. Something shifted in his expression, not quite acceptance, but perhaps the beginning of respect. They're waiting for my answer, he said finally. And he stood, straightening his tie with a ghost of his old confidence. I guess I'm about to find out what it's like to have my sister as my boss. The board meeting room at Global Core was intimidating in its understated elegance, all polished wood and soft lighting, with a view of the city skyline that made everything below look like a miniature model. I sat at the head of the table, wearing a new suit that actually fit properly, the board appointment documents spread before me. Eleanor sat to my right, the other board members arranged around the table, serious men and women who had initially regarded me with skepticism but now watched with cautious curiosity. Ryan stood near the doorway, his posture stiff but resigned. Before we proceed, I said, my voice steadier than I expected, I want to be clear about my vision for these technologies. The room quieted. Eleanor nodded encouragingly. My grandfather created these algorithms to make knowledge more accessible, more democratic, more useful, I continued. Not to concentrate power or to surveil or to manipulate. I looked around the table, meeting each gaze directly. If I accept this position, that will be my guiding principle. The technologies built on his work should expand human potential, not constrain it. They should illuminate, not obscure. They should serve humanity's best interests, not just corporate ones. One of the board members, an older man with steel-rimmed glasses, leaned forward. Noble sentiments, Miss Chen. But this is a business, not a philosophy seminar. It's both, I replied without hesitation. These technologies will shape how people access and understand information for generations. That's not just a business opportunity, it's a profound responsibility. And you believe you're qualified to guide that responsibility? Another board member asked. I've spent 15 years preserving knowledge, making it accessible, understanding its context and importance, I said. While others were focused on quarterly profits, I was ensuring that humanity's understanding wasn't lost or forgotten. I'd say that's precisely the qualification needed. Eleanor smiled slightly. Well said. She pushed the appointment documents toward me. The terms are as we discussed. The board has voted to approve your appointment as chairman, effective immediately upon your signature. I looked across at Ryan, still standing by the door. And my brother? Remains CSO of Neurotech, reporting to the board through you, Eleanor confirmed. All is agreed. I picked up the pen, thinking of my grandfather's workshop where he'd spent countless hours developing ideas that were decades ahead of their time. Of the archive where I'd preserved knowledge others deemed irrelevant. Of my daughters who were watching me transform from someone who was dismissed to someone who was heard. I signed the documents with a steady hand. Congratulations, Chairman Chen, Eleanor said, extending her hand. Around the table, the other board members offered varying degrees of welcome, some warm, some reserved, all attentive in a way they hadn't been before. Ryan approached last, his expression complex. Congratulations, Maya, he said formally, holding out his hand. Instead of taking it, I stood and hugged him, a gesture that clearly surprised him. After a moment's hesitation, his arms came around me in an awkward return embrace. We can make this work, I whispered. For Grandpa. For both of us. He nodded against my shoulder, then pulled away, composing himself quickly. I should get back to the office. The team will be waiting for direction. I'll come by tomorrow, I said. We'll talk to them together. As the board members filed out, Eleanor lingered. First decisions are important, Chairman. They set the tone for everything that follows. I nodded, gathering my papers. I know exactly what my first decision will be. The next morning, I dropped the girls at school myself, despite my new schedule. Zoe looked at me in my formal clothes and smiled knowingly. You're going to be great, Mom, she said with absolute certainty. Lily hugged my legs. Can we still have pancake Saturdays even though you're a boss now? I knelt to their level. Some things will change, but the important things, like pancake Saturdays, those stay exactly the same. At Neurotech's headquarters, Ryan waited in the lobby, visibly tense. The team's assembled in the main conference room, he said as we walked toward the elevators. Fair warning, they're not all happy about this arrangement. I wouldn't expect them to be, I replied. The conference room fell silent as we entered. About 30 people, developers, executives, project managers, all turned to stare at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Ryan cleared his throat. Everyone, this is Maya Chen, my sister and the new chairman of our board following the Global Core acquisition. She's here to introduce herself. I stepped forward, taking in the room full of skeptical faces. Thank you all for being here. I know this transition is unexpected. You all know my brother, but you don't know me, so let me be direct about what happens next. I paused, making eye contact around the room. First, I'm not here to dismantle what you've built. You've created remarkable implementations of the algorithmic frameworks my grandfather designed decades ago. That work continues, with proper attribution and licensing now in place. A woman near the back raised her hand. With respect, do you have any qualifications to lead a technology company? Ryan started to intervene, but I held up my hand. It's a fair question. I don't have a business degree or coding experience. What I have is 15 years of experience preserving, organizing, and making accessible the world's knowledge. I understand information architecture from the ground up. I smiled slightly. And I found the Keystone Protocol that you've been trying to reverse engineer for years. A murmur spread through the room. The woman who had questioned me looked surprised, then thoughtful. My first official decision as chairman, I continued, is to establish an ethics advisory council that will work alongside development teams to ensure our technologies serve their intended purpose, making knowledge more accessible and useful to humanity, not concentrating power or enabling surveillance. Ryan looked at me sharply. We should discuss this first. It's already approved by the board, I interrupted gently. And I'd like you to co-chair it with me. He blinked in surprise. What? You understand the business implications. I understand the ethical considerations. Together, we can ensure these technologies honor our grandfather's vision while succeeding commercially. The tension in the room shifted subtly. I could see people exchanging glances, reassessing. My second decision, I continued, is to allocate 15% of our annual research budget to open-source development of educational applications of our technology, focusing on underserved communities globally. Now there were whispers, not all of them approving. Ryan looked alarmed. Maya, that's a significant commitment, also approved by the board, I said. Eleanor was particularly supportive. I turned back to the team. I know you have questions and concerns. That's natural. But I'm not here as an adversary. I'm here because these technologies matter too much to be guided solely by market forces. They need stewardship that balances innovation with responsibility. I glanced at my brother. Ryan and I bring different strengths to that challenge. Together, with all of you, I believe we can build something extraordinary, not just profitable, but meaningful. As the meeting continued, I watched the initial skepticism in the room gradually shift. Not to full acceptance, that would take time, but to cautious openness. By the end, several team members approached with questions that were genuine, rather than challenging. Ryan hung back until everyone else had left. That was not what I expected, he admitted. What did you expect? I thought you'd come in swinging, try to prove something. Instead, he gestured vaguely. You were measured. Thoughtful. Did that surprise you? I asked. He laughed softly. Everything about you has surprised me lately, Maya. 6 months later, I stood in the community library where it had all begun, helping set up for the launch of our first educational initiative, an interactive knowledge platform designed specifically for rural and underserved schools. My team from Neurotech worked alongside local librarians, setting up demonstration stations. Ryan entered carrying a box of promotional materials, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. The corporate armor he'd always worn had softened, replaced by something more authentic. The press is starting to arrive, he said, setting down the box. Eleanor just pulled up too. I nodded, straightening the display table. How are you feeling about today? Good, he said, surprising me with his enthusiasm. Really good. Actually. This project, it matters in a way quarterly reports never did. A small group of children entered the library, led by their teacher. Among them were Zoe and Lily, proudly showing their classmates around. Lily spotted me and waved excitedly. Mom, can we show them how it works? Please? I smiled. Of course. You're our best demonstrators. As the children gathered around the interactive displays, I stepped back, watching the excitement on their faces as they discovered how easily they could explore topics that interested them, how the system adapted to their questions and curiosity. Eleanor joined me, observing quietly for a moment before speaking. Your grandfather would be proud, she said simply. This is exactly what he envisioned, knowledge democratized, accessible, alive. I nodded, too moved to speak immediately. Across the room, Ryan was kneeling beside a young boy, patiently explaining how to navigate the system. My brother, once so dismissive of anything that didn't generate immediate profit, now fully engaged in sharing knowledge for its own sake. It's just the beginning, I said finally. We have so much more to do. Eleanor smiled. That's why you're the right person for this role, Maya. You see the journey, not just the destination. Later that evening, after the successful launch, our family gathered at my house, no longer the small apartment, but a comfortable home with a garden where the girls could play. Ryan and Vanessa brought dinner. Their attitude toward me had transformed completely in the months since the acquisition. As we sat around the table, Ryan raised his glass. To Maya, he said, his voice sincere. Who taught me that success isn't measured by the size of your office or the balance in your account, but by the impact of your work? I felt my eyes grow moist. To family, I countered. And to Grandpa, who believed we were both necessary to bring his vision to life. After dinner, while the others chatted in the living room, I stepped outside onto the porch, breathing in the cool evening air. The weight of responsibility I'd taken on was still sometimes overwhelming, but it no longer felt crushing. Instead, it felt right, as if I'd finally found the path I was meant to walk. Ryan joined me, leaning against the railing. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "For all the years I looked down on your work. For every dismissive comment about your dead-end job. I was wrong." I turned to him, seeing genuine regret in his expression. "You know what's ironic? If you hadn't been so dismissive, I might never have found the strength to stand up to you. Sometimes our greatest challenges lead to our greatest growth." He smiled ruefully. "Still, I wish I'd seen your value sooner." "It wasn't about my value," I corrected gently. "It was about recognizing different kinds of contributions. The world needs both builders and preservers, both innovators and stewards." Inside, I could hear the girls laughing with their aunt, the sound of family healing and growing stronger. "Chairman Chen," Ryan said, nudging my shoulder playfully. "Still can't quite believe it." I laughed. "Neither can I, some days. But then I remember Grandpa's words in his journal, about knowledge needing to be stewarded with wisdom and compassion." As we rejoined the others inside, I caught sight of Zoe's drawing, the one with me wearing a crown, now framed on the wall. It reminded me daily that sometimes our perceived limitations are actually our greatest strengths, and that the paths others mock might lead to destinations they never imagined possible. My brother had once dismissed my career as worthless. Now, he reported to me as chairman of the board. Not because I'd sought revenge or power, but because I'd remained true to values that ultimately proved more valuable than all his corporate strategies combined. The dead-end job he had ridiculed had given me exactly the perspective needed to guide the future of information technology, with wisdom, with care, and with a deep understanding of how knowledge shapes humanity's path forward. 1 year into my role as chairman, I stood at the podium of the Global Innovation Summit, surveying a sea of faces, industry leaders, researchers, and policymakers from around the world. The lights were bright, but not as intimidating as they once would have been. Behind me, a large screen displayed our latest project, a knowledge access initiative bringing educational resources to remote communities across 3 continents. "Technology without conscience is merely power without purpose," I began, my voice steady. "A year ago, I was an archivist cataloging history. Today, I'm helping shape it. Not because I sought power, but because I understood something essential, that how we preserve and share knowledge determines who benefits from it." From the front row, Eleanor nodded encouragingly. Beside her sat Ryan, his posture relaxed but attentive, a notepad open on his lap. How far we'd come from that tense family brunch where he dismissed my career with a casual wave of his hand. "The algorithms my grandfather developed decades ago weren't just clever mathematical frameworks," I continued. "They were a vision of how information could serve humanity equally, not concentrated in the hands of a few, but accessible to many." I gestured to the screen behind me where images cycled through, children in rural villages using our educational platforms, researchers collaborating across continents, community archives digitizing local knowledge that might otherwise be lost. "This is technology with purpose. This is power with conscience." The applause that followed wasn't just polite, it was enthusiastic, even from those who had initially questioned my qualifications. As I stepped away from the podium, a young woman approached, extending her hand. "Dr. Chen, I'm Sophia Lin. From MIT's Media Lab. Your implementation of the Keystone Protocol for educational access is revolutionary. We'd love to collaborate." I smiled, remembering a time when such recognition would have seemed impossible. "I'd like that. And please, call me Maya." Later, as the conference reception wound down, I found Ryan by the windows overlooking the city skyline, nursing a drink and watching the crowd. "Quite a change from last year's summit," he observed as I joined him. "Remember? You were my +1 foot then. I introduced you as my sister, the librarian, and that tech CEO asked if you had any book recommendations." I laughed. "And now he's pitching me partnership ideas." Ryan's expression grew more serious. "You've exceeded every expectation, Maya. Not just the board's, mine too. I thought you'd struggle with the corporate politics, the technical decisions." "I did struggle," I admitted. "I still do sometimes. But preserving knowledge for 15 years taught me more than I realized, about information architecture, about organizational systems, about the long view. About people," Ryan added. "You read people remarkably well." I smiled. "Comes with watching library patrons for years. You learn to see what they're really looking for, even when they can't articulate it themselves." Across the room, Eleanor was deep in conversation with government officials from 3 countries, occasionally glancing our way. She caught my eye and nodded slightly, a silent communication we'd developed over months of working together. "She's negotiating the Southeast Asia expansion," Ryan murmured. "I know," I replied. "And she'll close it." Those officials came specifically because of our ethical framework for data sovereignty. They trust us not to exploit their citizens' information. Ryan shook his head in amazement. Trust as a business advantage. Who would have thought? Grandpa did, I said simply. The following morning, I took a rare day off. Despite my position, I'd made certain commitments non-negotiable, including attending important events in my daughter's lives. Today was Zoe's science fair, where she was presenting a project on information systems inspired by her great-grandfather's work. The middle school gymnasium buzzed with activity, proud parents snapping photos, nervous students making last-minute adjustments to their displays. I spotted Zoe immediately, standing tall beside her project, confidently explaining her work to one of the judges. At 12, she already showed the quiet determination that had characterized my grandfather. Her display featured a model of interconnected nodes representing how information flowed through different systems, from natural ecosystems to digital networks. When she saw me, her face lit up, but she maintained her composure until the judge moved on to the next project. Then she rushed over, hugging me tightly. "You came," she exclaimed. "I thought you might have to cancel because of the summit." "Nothing could make me miss this," I assured her. "Your project looks amazing." Her eyes shone. "I used great-grandpa's theories about recursive information flows. And I cited your white paper on ethical data architecture too." I blinked in surprise. "You read my white paper?" "Mom," she said with the gentle exasperation of a preteen addressing a clueless adult, "you're kind of famous in the data ethics world now." Of course I read it. As we talked, I noticed several parents watching us, whispering behind their hands. A year ago, I might have assumed they were judging me negatively. Now I recognized the different quality of their attention, a mixture of curiosity and respect. One mother approached, smiling hesitantly. "Excuse me, are you Maya Chen? From Global Core?" I nodded, extending my hand. "Just Maya is fine. I'm Diana Kim. I work in educational technology," she explained. "Your recent speech about knowledge equity changed our entire product roadmap. We've completely reimagined how we approach access for underserved schools." "That's wonderful to hear," I said sincerely. "I had no idea your daughter went to Westridge." She continued, glancing at Zoe. "My son James is in her grade. He talks about her all the time, says she's the smartest kid in school." Zoe blushed, looking pleased but embarrassed. "Mom, can I go check on my display? The judges are coming back around." As she hurried off, Diana lowered her voice. "You know, you've become something of a role model for a lot of us, women in tech who don't fit the traditional mold. The way you've centered ethics in your business strategy, it's inspiring." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan, "Emergency board call in 30. Eleanor needs you." I excused myself and stepped outside to call Eleanor directly. "What's happened?" I asked without preamble. "Quantum Sphere is making a play," she replied, her voice tense. "They're approaching our key research team with massive offers. And they've somehow gotten their hands on preliminary designs for the next-gen protocol." My mind raced. Quantum Sphere was our largest competitor, known for aggressive tactics and few ethical guardrails. "I'll be there in an hour. Hold the team together until then. The board wants immediate action," Eleanor warned. "Some are suggesting we counter with financial incentives alone." "That won't work," I said firmly. "Not with our core team. They're not just motivated by money." "I know. That's why we need you here." I ended the call and returned to the gymnasium, searching for Zoe. I found her standing proudly beside her display, now adorned with a blue first-place ribbon. Her face fell slightly when she saw my expression. "You have to go," she guessed. I nodded, kneeling to her level despite my formal clothes. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. There's an emergency at work. But I saw enough to know your project is brilliant, and I'm so proud of you." She straightened her shoulders. "It's okay, Mom. I understand. What you do is important. Not more important than you," I said firmly. "Never more important than you. I'll make this up to you, promise." "I know you will." She hugged me fiercely. "Go save the company." The neurotech offices were in chaos when I arrived. Engineers huddled in tense groups, whispering anxiously. Ryan met me at the elevator, his face grim. 7 senior developers received offers this morning, he reported as we walked briskly toward the conference room. Double their current salaries, premium stock options, immediate promotion. And the leaked protocol designs? We're still investigating, but it had to be someone with high-level access. The board had already assembled when we entered, some in person, others on video screens. The tension in the room was palpable. Chairman Chen, one of the directors, began immediately, "We need decisive action. Quantum Sphere is making a direct play for our intellectual assets." "I understand the urgency," I replied calmly, taking my seat. "But before we discuss countermeasures, I want to hear from the team directly. Are any of the approached developers here?" Ryan nodded to someone outside, and a young woman entered, Dr. Mei Zhang, our lead quantum algorithm specialist. She looked uncomfortable but determined. "Dr. Zhang," I said warmly, "thank you for joining us. I understand Quantum Sphere has made you an offer." She nodded. "They have. It's substantial." "I'm sure it is. May I ask what you're considering?" Dr. Zhang glanced around the imposing boardroom before answering. "The financial package is impressive, yes. But what they're really offering is the chance to implement the protocol at unprecedented scale. They're promising deployment across their entire global infrastructure within 6 months. With no ethical oversight," I noted. "That's correct," she admitted. "Their approach is primarily market-driven." I considered her words carefully. "Dr. Zhang, when you joined Neurotech, you wrote in your application that you wanted to develop technologies that expanded human potential rather than exploited it. Do you still believe in that vision?" Her expression softened. "Of course. It's why I've stayed despite previous offers." "Then let me be direct," I said. "We won't match Quantum Sphere's financial package." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Ryan gave me a sharp look. "Instead," I continued, "I'm proposing something different. An ethics-led development division with you as its director. Full autonomy to implement the protocol according to the principles that brought you here in the first place, with guaranteed deployment to our educational and public sector partnerships." Dr. Zhang's eyes widened. "You're offering me control over how the technology is implemented?" "With appropriate oversight, yes. Because ultimately, these algorithms aren't just about processing power, they're about how information shapes humanity's future. My grandfather understood that. I believe you do too." The room fell silent as Dr. Zhang considered. Finally, she nodded. "I'd like to discuss this with the rest of the team. But, yes, this interests me far more than Quantum Sphere's money." After she left, several board members immediately objected. "You can't just create new divisions on the spot. The financial implications, this sets a dangerous precedent." I held up my hand. "The alternative is losing our core team and having our technology implemented without the ethical frameworks that make it truly revolutionary. That's not just a moral failure, it's a business failure." Eleanor, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "Maya's right. Our competitive advantage isn't just technical, it's philosophical. Our partners and clients choose us precisely because we approach information technology differently." Ryan surprised me by adding his support. "The ethics-led development concept has merit. It could become a significant differentiator in the market, especially with increasing regulatory scrutiny on AI implementations." By evening, the crisis had been largely averted. 6 of the 7 approached developers had decided to stay, attracted by the new division and its mission-driven approach. The leak investigation continued, but initial findings suggested it was likely an opportunistic breach rather than deliberate sabotage. As the office emptied, I remained at my desk, reviewing the day's events. Ryan appeared in my doorway, looking exhausted but relieved. "That was unorthodox," he said, dropping into a chair. "Creating an entire division as a retention strategy." I smiled. "Not just a retention strategy. It's something I've been considering for months. Today just accelerated the timeline. Still, it was a risk. Less of a risk than losing our soul as a company," I countered. "Technology without values is just tools without purpose." Ryan studied me thoughtfully. "You know, a year ago I would have dismissed that as naive idealism. Now I see it's actually pragmatic in its own way." "The longest view often is," I replied. He glanced at his watch. "It's late. Don't you need to get back for the girls?" "Miss Patel is staying overnight. I promised Zoe I'd make up for missing the end of her science fair, so we're having a special breakfast tomorrow." I hesitated, then added, "You and Vanessa should join us. The girls would love to see their uncle." A genuine smile spread across his face. "I'd like that." As he left, I turned to the window, watching the city lights flicker against the darkening sky. In moments of crisis, it was easy to fall back on old patterns, to sacrifice ethics for expediency, values for immediate gains. The true test of leadership wasn't avoiding such crossroads but choosing the right path when they appeared. My Phone lit up with a text from Zoe. Did you save the company? Smiling face with smiling eyes, I smiled and replied, we saved something more important, our purpose. The breakfast with the girls and Ryan's family the next morning was lively and warm, a far cry from those tense family gatherings of the past. Lily entertained everyone with dramatic readings from her favorite books, while Zoe proudly displayed her science fair ribbon and certificate. Vanessa, once so dismissive of my modest life, now engaged eagerly with the girls, asking thoughtful questions about their projects and interests. The change in her was perhaps even more striking than the change in Ryan, from condescension to genuine warmth. Maya, she said as we cleared the table while the others moved to the living room, I owe you an apology. The way I treated you before, it was inexcusable. I paused, dish towel in hand. What brought this on? She glanced toward the living room where Ryan was helping Lily build something with blocks. Seeing you lead with such grace. You had every reason to be vindictive when you gained power over us. Instead, you've been generous. Inclusive. Holding grudges takes too much energy, I said simply. And we're family. She nodded, looking thoughtful. I've been volunteering at the community library program you started. It's opened my eyes to a different kind of value than what I was raised to prioritize. Before I could respond, my phone rang, Eleanor's ringtone. I excused myself to answer. Maya, she said without preamble, the president's technology advisor. Just called. They want to meet with us next week about implementing our educational platform nationally. My heart raced. That's extraordinary. What prompted this? Your handling of the quantum sphere situation made waves. The ethics-led development approach resonated with key decision-makers who've been concerned about the direction of AI implementation in education. I'll clear my schedule, I promised. One more thing, she added. Time magazine is finalizing their most influential list. You're being considered for the cover. I nearly dropped the phone. That's ridiculous. No, Eleanor corrected. Gently, it's recognition of how you've changed the conversation around technology ethics. This isn't just about you, Maya, it's about the values you represent. After ending the call, I stood quietly in my kitchen, trying to process this latest development. From librarian to magazine cover in less than 2 years, a trajectory that still felt dreamlike at times. Ryan appeared in the doorway. Good news, he asked, noting my expression. I nodded, sharing Eleanor's updates. His eyebrows rose impressively. The national education platform, that's huge. That could transform access for millions of students. It's what Grandpa would have wanted, I said softly. Knowledge democratized, accessible to everyone regardless of circumstance. Ryan smiled. You know, I used to think his ideas were impractical idealism. Now I see they were just waiting for the right person to implement them. He paused. He always believed in you, Maya. Even when I didn't. 2 weeks later, I stood in the Oval Office alongside Eleanor and Ryan, watching as the president signed the executive order establishing our educational platform as the national standard for digital learning resources. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, a recognition that how we share knowledge shapes who has power in society. As we left the White House, reporters called out questions. One voice rose above the others, Ms. Chen. How does it feel to go from librarian to national technology leader in less than 2 years? I paused on the steps, considering my answer carefully. It feels like vindication, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been dismissed because their work didn't fit someone else's definition of success. I gestured to Ryan beside me. My brother once mocked my career as a dead-end job. Now we lead together, combining different kinds of expertise toward a common purpose. That's the real lesson here, that true innovation comes from valuing diverse perspectives, not dismissing them. Later that evening, alone in my hotel room, I called the girls to say goodnight. Zoe's voice was excited as she described the social media buzz about my White House appearance. Mom, you're trending. Everyone at school is talking about it. James Kim's mom sent a video of you on the White House steps to our whole class. I laughed. That's a bit embarrassing. No, it's amazing, Zoe insisted. You're showing everyone that you don't have to be loud or flashy to make a difference. You just have to stand by what matters. After we hung up, I sat by the window, looking out at the Washington Monument illuminated against the night sky. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from that humiliating family brunch to the Oval Office, from being dismissed to being heard. The Time magazine that had arrived earlier that day lay on the desk, my photo on the cover alongside the headline, "The Librarian Revolutionizing Tech Ethics." The article detailed my unconventional path and how it had shaped a new approach to information technology, one centered on accessibility, responsibility, and the democratization of knowledge. But what moved me most wasn't the recognition itself. It was knowing that somewhere, a woman in a job others dismissed as unimportant might see it and recognize her own potential power. That a girl might realize her quiet dedication to learning. And preserving knowledge wasn't a weakness but a strength the world desperately needed. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Grandpa would be so proud of you." "I know I am." I smiled, remembering my grandfather's workshop with its papers and prototypes, his belief that information should serve humanity equally. He'd seen potential in me when others saw limitations. He'd valued my perspective when others dismissed it. And now, the dead-end job my brother had mocked had given me exactly the insight needed to guide his company, and perhaps the future of information technology itself, toward a more equitable vision. Not through confrontation or revenge, but through steadfast commitment to principles that ultimately proved more valuable than any corporate strategy. The journey hadn't been about proving Ryan wrong. It had been about proving my grandfather right, that how we preserve and share knowledge matters deeply, that different kinds of expertise deserve equal respect, and that sometimes the quietest voices have the most important things to say. As I turned out the light, I thought of Zoe's science fair project, those interconnected nodes representing how information flows through systems. Just as in nature, where seemingly small organisms can maintain the balance of entire ecosystems, sometimes the people society overlooks are exactly those who understand most deeply how to create meaningful change. The path forward wouldn't be easy. There would be more crises, more challenges to our ethical framework, more pressure to compromise. But I was no longer the hesitant archivist doubting her place at the table. I was Chairman Chen, not despite my background, but because of it. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful lesson of all, that our greatest strengths often hide in the very aspects of ourselves others are quickest to dismiss. 3 years into my chairmanship, I stood in the gleaming glass atrium of our new headquarters, the Chen Innovation Center. Sunlight streamed through the skylights, illuminating the central installation, a towering sculpture of interconnected nodes representing my grandfather's original algorithms, each connection point glowing with soft blue light. The space buzzed with energy as employees and guests mingled before the official opening ceremony. What had begun as a corporate acquisition had evolved into something much more, a movement reimagining how technology could serve humanity rather than merely profit from it. Quite a change from the Archive Center, isn't it? Eleanor appeared beside me, elegant as always in her signature charcoal suit. I smiled. Sometimes I still expect to smell old books and hear the quiet rustle of turning pages. "Do you miss it?" she asked. The question gave me pause. "Parts of it," I admitted. The deep focus, the direct connection to knowledge and history. But this, I gestured to the vibrant space around us, this is bringing those same values to a much larger stage. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. Your grandfather's vision, amplified. Across the atrium, I spotted Ryan leading a group of international education ministers on a tour. His presentation style had softened over the years, less corporate slickness, more authentic passion. He caught my eye and raised his hand in a small salute. My daughters wove through the crowd toward me, Zoe now 15 and remarkably poised, Lily 12 and bubbling with energy. They both wore dresses they'd chosen themselves for the occasion, no longer the little girls I'd tucked in at night with whispered reassurances that everything would be okay. "Mom," Zoe said, her eyes bright with excitement, "Dr. Zhang wants to show us the new Keystone Protocol visualization in the education lab. Can we go?" "Of course," I replied. "Just be back for the ceremony in 30 minutes. As they hurried away, I noticed several attendees watching them with interest. The daughters of Maya Chen had become minor celebrities in their own right, especially Zoe, whose science fair project on information ethics had been expanded into a framework now taught in schools nationwide. "Ms. Chen." A tall man with silver hair approached, extending his hand. "William Foster, National Science Foundation. Your work integrating ethical frameworks directly into algorithmic design is revolutionizing how we approach technology governance. We'd like to discuss a potential partnership." 5 years ago, such figures would have dismissed me as irrelevant. Now they sought my guidance, not because I'd pursued power, but because I'd remained steadfast in values that had proven surprisingly prescient as the tech world confronted its responsibilities. The opening ceremony began with a short film chronicling our journey, from my grandfather's original patents to our current global initiatives. I watched as my own transformation played out on screen, from the uncertain archivist being mocked at family gatherings to Time magazine's most influential cover, from struggling single mother to technology visionary. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the podium amidst warm applause. The faces before me represented a cross-section of global influence, government officials, technology leaders, educational pioneers, community organizers, all united by a shared interest in how information technology could better serve humanity. 5 years ago, I began, my brother told me I'd never amount to anything more than a failure. Today, he works alongside me as we guide a vision neither of us could have achieved alone. Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. Ryan, standing to the side, shook his head with a good-natured smile. But this isn't a story about proving someone wrong, I continued. It's about recognizing that true innovation comes not from dismissing different perspectives, but from integrating them. The archivist's deep respect for knowledge preservation and the business strategist's understanding of implementation, both are essential. I gestured to the algorithmic sculpture glowing behind me. My grandfather understood something profound about information, that it isn't just data to be processed, but a living resource that shapes human potential. How we structure it, who can access it, and what values guide its flow, these aren't technical questions. They're human questions. The crowd grew contemplative as I continued, outlining our vision for the next decade: educational initiatives reaching remote communities, ethical AI frameworks protecting vulnerable populations, knowledge preservation projects safeguarding indigenous wisdom alongside cutting-edge research. We stand at an inflection point in human history, I concluded. Technology has given us unprecedented power to process information, but wisdom comes from how we use that power. Not for control, not for profit alone, but for expanding what's possible for all of us. The applause that followed wasn't merely polite, it carried a weight of conviction that resonated through the atrium. As I stepped away from the podium, the first to embrace me wasn't Eleanor or Ryan, but Zoe, her eyes shining with pride. "That was amazing, Mom," she whispered. The reception afterward flowed through the building's open spaces. I moved from conversation to conversation, discussing implementation strategies with education ministers, ethical frameworks with technology partners, and community access programs with local leaders. During a brief quiet moment, I slipped away to my office, a space I designed to maintain connection with my roots. One wall featured a floor-to-ceiling digital display of archive materials, constantly rotating through historical documents that informed our work. Another held framed photos of the community library where I'd first encountered my grandfather's journals. On my desk sat a simple archival box containing his original notes on the Keystone Protocol. Ryan found me there, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "Hiding from your admirers?" he teased, offering me one. I accepted with a smile. "Just grounding myself. Days like today still feel somewhat surreal." He leaned against the desk, studying me thoughtfully. "You know, I used to pity you. I actually believed you'd chosen a lesser path, that you were settling for mediocrity." "And now?" I prompted. "Now I understand you were playing a different game entirely." He gestured toward the wall of archival materials. "While I was climbing corporate ladders, you were building a foundation of knowledge and principles that turned out to be far more valuable." We stood in companionable silence for a moment, sipping champagne and listening to the distant hum of celebration beyond my office door. "There's something I need to tell you," Ryan said finally. "I've accepted the UN's offer to lead their global education technology initiative." I straightened in surprise. "Ryan, that's wonderful. But what about your position here?" "It's time for new challenges," he replied. "And honestly, Maya, I've learned everything I can from you. Now it's time to apply those lessons on a different stage." Something in his tone caught my attention. "There's more to this decision, isn't there?" He smiled slightly. "Still reading me like a book." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Working under your leadership these past few years has been humbling, transformative. I was so caught up in traditional metrics of success that I missed the deeper purpose of what we do. And now? Now I want to build something that reflects my own evolving values, not just contribute to your vision." His eyes met mine directly. "You helped me find a better version of myself, Maya. I want to honor that by serving where I'm most needed." I felt a complex mixture of pride, sadness, and deep affection for the brother who had once dismissed me so casually. "You'll be amazing in that role. There's something else," he added, reaching into his jacket pocket. "I found this in Grandpa's workshop while we were clearing it for the museum exhibit." He handed me a small, worn envelope, my name written on it in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. The paper felt fragile between my fingers, a message across time. "I'll give you some privacy," Ryan said, squeezing my shoulder gently before slipping out of the office. I carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the single page inside. "My dearest Maya, if you're reading this, then something remarkable has happened. The seeds I planted have found fertile ground in you. I recognized something in you from your earliest days, not just intelligence, but wisdom. The patience to look beyond immediate rewards to deeper truths. The humility to preserve knowledge rather than claim it as your own. The courage to value what others dismiss. These qualities may not seem valuable in a world that celebrates the loud, the aggressive, the self-promoting. But I believe a time will come when they will matter more than anything else. Technology without conscience is merely power without purpose. Remember that always. Led with that truth. With endless faith in you, Grandpa. Tears blurred my vision as I carefully refold the letter. All these years later, his words still had the power to center me, to remind me of what truly mattered beyond accolades and achievements. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Eleanor entered, her expression both pleased and apologetic. Sorry to interrupt, but the president's science advisor is asking for you. And the Japanese education minister can only stay another hour. I tucked the letter carefully into my pocket. I'll be right there. As we walked back toward the reception, Eleanor glanced at me curiously. Everything all right? Better than all right, I assured her. Just reconnecting with why we do this work. The remainder of the day passed in a whirlwind of meaningful conversations, potential partnerships, and strategic planning. By evening, when the crowd had thinned to just key team members and close associates, I found myself on the rooftop garden with my daughters, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in gold and rose. Lily leaned against me, her energy finally waning after the excitement of the day. Mom, are we famous now? She asked, the question both innocent and profound. I laughed softly. Not in the way celebrities are famous. But people know our work, and that's a different kind of recognition. Zoe, ever thoughtful, added, it's about impact, not attention. Right, Mom? Exactly, I agreed, putting an arm around each of them. Success isn't measured by who knows your name, but by how your work improves lives. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, absorbing the peaceful transition from day to night. Then Zoe said something that caught me by surprise. I'm thinking about becoming an archivist. I turned to her, eyebrows raised. Really? What sparked that interest? She shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. I've been volunteering at the community archive, and there's something powerful about preserving stories that might otherwise be lost. Not everyone's history makes it into official records, you know? But those perspectives matter. My heart swelled with an emotion beyond pride, a profound recognition of cycles completing, of values transmitted not through pressure but through lived example. Besides, she added with a small smile, you showed everyone that being an archivist can change the world. Later that night, long after the girls had gone to bed, I sat alone in my home office reviewing the day's events. The Chen Innovation Center's opening marked not just an organizational milestone but a philosophical one, the mainstreaming of ideas that had once been dismissed as impractical idealism. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. When I opened it, I found a photo of a community library in a remote village, children gathered around one of our educational interfaces, their faces alight with discovery. The caption read, your grandfather's vision, reaching places he could never have imagined. Thank you. I traced the children's expressions with my finger, feeling the weight and privilege of the platform I now held. This was the true measure of success, not the corporate title, not the magazine covers, not even the presidential summons, but the expansion of possibility for those who had previously been excluded from knowledge's corridors of power. My journey from dismissed archivist to respected chairman hadn't been about personal vindication. It had been about proving that certain values, preservation, accessibility, ethical stewardship, weren't just morally right but pragmatically essential in a world drowning in information but thirsting for wisdom. The following morning, I woke before dawn, a habit from my single mother days that had never quite faded despite my changed circumstances. I made coffee and sat on my balcony, watching the city slowly illuminate as the sun crept above the horizon. My phone rang, Eleanor, calling unusually early. Maya, she said without preamble, check your email. The National Archive just announced their new digital transformation initiative. They want us as their primary partner. I smiled, thinking of my former colleagues at the Regional Archive Center. Send them my calendar. I want to meet as soon as possible. Already done. There's something else, the board has reviewed your proposal for the Open Knowledge Trust. They've approved the full funding request. The Open Knowledge Trust had been my most ambitious initiative yet, a global endowment dedicated to preserving and making accessible culturally significant information from communities traditionally excluded from historical records. It represented everything I believed about knowledge equity and democratic access. That's extraordinary, I managed, genuinely moved. I didn't expect unanimous approval. Your brother made quite an impassioned argument, Eleanor noted. Said it was exactly what your grandfather would have prioritized. After ending the call, I sat with the news, watching the city fully awaken. The journey from that painful family brunch to this moment hadn't been a straight line. There had been challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt, but throughout it all, a steadily clarifying vision of what was possible when knowledge was treated as a resource for collective flourishing, rather than a tool for individual advancement. Later that day, I visited the community library where my career had begun, a ritual I maintained despite my packed schedule. The building had been renovated through one of our foundation grants, transformed from a struggling facility into a vibrant knowledge hub with both physical and digital resources. Miss Patel, now the head librarian, greeted me warmly. The chairwoman herself, still making time for us ordinary bookkeepers, she teased. "This place is my anchor," I replied honestly. "It reminds me where all the important work really happens." We walked through the reading room where children sprawled on comfortable cushions, absorbed in both traditional books and interactive learning modules. In the Digital Access Center, elderly community members received one-on-one guidance on using technology to connect with family and access services. The archive room, my former domain, now featured a state-of-the-art preservation system, alongside traditional methods. "You know," Miss Patel said thoughtfully as we paused by the community history display, "when you first left to take that corporate position, many of us worried you'd be swallowed by that world, its values, its priorities." "And now?" I asked, curious about her perspective. "Now we see you didn't join them, you transformed them." She gestured around the vibrant space. "This isn't charity or corporate social responsibility. This is a fundamental shift in how knowledge and technology intersect with community needs." As we continued our tour, a teenage girl approached nervously, clutching a tablet. "Excuse me, Ms. Chen? I'm doing a project on information ethics, and I wondered if you might have a few minutes to answer some questions." 20 minutes later, I sat with Dina in the library's courtyard garden, impressed by her thoughtful inquiries about algorithmic bias, knowledge accessibility, and the future of community archives in an increasingly digital landscape. "What made you interested in these topics?" I asked as our conversation wound down. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, suddenly shy. "My mom's a housekeeper. No one in my family went to college. But I've always loved organizing information, making connections between ideas. When I read about your journey from librarian to technology leader, it made me think maybe those skills could matter." I felt a profound sense of responsibility in that moment, not just for the corporate decisions that affected millions, but for the individual stories of possibility that my unlikely path had helped author. "Those skills don't just matter, Dina," I told her. "They're essential. The world doesn't just need more technology, it needs more wisdom about how to use it. That comes from people who understand the value of context, of careful preservation, of making connections across differences." Her expression brightened. "That's exactly what I want to do." As I left the library, my phone buzzed with a calendar. Alert, a board meeting in 30 minutes to discuss the next phase of our global expansion. From community conversation to corporate governance in less than an hour, the dual worlds I now navigated daily. In the car, I reread my grandfather's letter, finding renewed meaning in his words about technology and conscience. Then I texted Ryan, "Your UN appointment is officially announced. So proud of you." His response came quickly, "Couldn't have done it without you showing me a different way to lead. You're changing more than the company, Maya. You're changing how we think about success itself." The board meeting that afternoon focused on our 5-year strategic vision, balancing technological innovation with ethical implementation, profit with purpose, scale with meaningful impact. As chairman, I guided the discussion toward our core principles while remaining practical about sustainability and growth. "The Keystone Protocol implementations in education have exceeded all projections," our CFO reported. "Not just in adoption rates but in measurable learning outcomes." "And the ethical oversight frameworks?" I asked. "Being adopted by 3 major competitors," Ryan added. "They're presenting it as their own initiative, of course, but it's our model with minor modifications." I smiled slightly. Good. The goal was never exclusivity. The more widely these standards spread, the better for everyone. As the meeting concluded, Eleanor remained behind while the others filed out. "The Morgan Foundation called again," she said. "They're insistent about the Lifetime Achievement Award." I shook my head. "I'm 43, Eleanor. Lifetime achievement seems premature." "It's not about your age," she pointed out. "It's about your impact. You've fundamentally changed how the technology sector approaches its responsibilities to society." "We've changed it," I corrected. "All of us together." She studied me with that penetrating gaze that had become so familiar over the years. "You still don't quite see it, do you? How remarkable your journey has been." "I see a path that made sense to me," I replied honestly. "Preserving what matters, making knowledge accessible, ensuring technology serves human flourishing rather than diminishing it. That doesn't feel remarkable, it feels necessary. Eleanor smiled. And that, Maya, is precisely why you've been able to lead this transformation. Because for you, it was never about proving your brother wrong or claiming power. It was about serving values that turned out to be exactly what the world needed. That evening, I hosted a small dinner at my home. Ryan and Vanessa, Eleanor, Dr. Zhang, and a few other key allies in our work. As we gathered around the table, I was struck by how different this felt from those tense family brunches years ago. The conversation flowed easily between professional achievements and personal stories, technological breakthroughs, and ethical considerations. During a lull, Ryan raised his glass. To Maya, he said, his expression uncharacteristically earnest. Who showed me that the most powerful leadership doesn't come from dominance but from wisdom. From valuing what truly matters when others can only see what sells. As glasses clinked around the table, I felt a deep sense of coming full circle. The brother who had once dismissed me now championed the very qualities he had previously mocked. Not because I had defeated him, but because I had remained steadfast in values that proved more durable than fleeting definitions of success. Later, after the guests had departed and the girls had gone to bed, I sat alone in my garden, reflecting on the extraordinary journey from that painful rejection to this moment of purpose and impact. My phone lit up with a final message for the day, a photo from one of our rural education partners showing a young girl in a remote village accessing university-level physics courses through our platform. The accompanying note read, "She wants to be an astronaut. Before your program, she didn't even know what physics was. Now the stars are within her reach." I smiled into the quiet night, feeling the weight and wonder of transformation, not just my own, but the expanding possibilities for countless others whose potential had previously been constrained by limited access to knowledge. My brother had mocked my dead-end job until the day came when his company's board recognized me as their chairman. But the real victory wasn't in the title or the power. It was in proving that preserving knowledge, making it accessible, and approaching it with ethical care weren't just nice ideals but essential strategies for navigating a complex future. The librarian's perspective, patient, contextual, focused on long-term preservation rather than immediate gain, had turned out to be exactly what the technology world needed most. Not instead of business acumen, but alongside it, creating a more complete vision of how information could serve humanity's highest potential. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, I thought of my grandfather's words, "Technology without conscience is merely power without purpose." In remaining true to that understanding, I had found not just professional success but meaningful impact, the kind that ripples outward, creating new possibilities for generations to come. Not bad, I thought with quiet satisfaction, for what began as a dead-end job. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.